All right. So your GCF is a squared b cubed. So then you're going to put that in front. Now I have 4 terms here. You have 4 terms here. All right. So you're going to use the FOIL method, the distributive property. So a squared times what's a to the 4th?
2.
A squared. Don't say 2, say a squared. B cubed times what's b to the 7th?
B to the 4th.
B to the 4th. So that gives us this. Minus a squared times 1 is that a squared, right?
Mm-hmm.
But do I need to put that 1 there?
No.
No. Just put in the corner. Okay, now b cubed times what's b cubed? 1. Okay, now I do need to put something there though, right? Because that's really 1 times what? 1, which is 1. Because it kind of makes sense because a squared b cubed times 1 is a squared b cubed, is itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you need 1 there. Okay, so a squared times, let me move to the plus here. A squared times 1 is at a squared. B cubed times what's b to the 4th?
Just
B. So 1 times b is just b. Minus a squared times what's a cubed?
A.
B cubed times what's b cubed? 1, but a times 1 is still
Right.
a. So there's your answer. I'm not sure what your issue was. I just did the problem. Okay? All right. Anything else? All right. Okay.
I do.
Yes.
Can you go over 10 and 4, please?
Well, let me see which one.
Worksheet.
D.
Okay, so, well, let's do 10. 4 the GCF is 4x. What didn't you understand about 4? Tell me what your issue was.
Basically, what I'm not understanding, once I find the GCF, do I put it like, I put the GCF in front of the problem and then do the FOIL method?
No, you do distributive property. So number 4, where you have 4x cubed minus 8x squared plus 16x. So if you look at the coefficients 4, 8, and 16, what's the GCF of 4, 8, and 16? 4. Now there's x in every term. That's a 3 right here. There are 3 factors of x here, 2 here, 1 here. How many do I need? 1. So there's your GCF. Once you find your GCF, remember that goes in front of the parentheses. And so you're going to say 4x times the distributive property. 4x times what's 4x cubed?
4x.
No, 4 times 4 is 16. 4x times what is 4x cubed? X squared. So I'm not sure where some of your issues are coming from. You guys, you're going to have to remember some stuff from the previous course where you multiply like bases. What do you do with those exponents? You add them. Okay? So you got to get a handle on that because it's the whole, most of the rest of the course deals with factoring. And so 4x times what's a negative 8x squared?
Negative 2x.
4 times 2 is 8. X times what is x squared? X. So 2x. 4x times what is a positive 16x? 4. Because 4x times 4 is 16x. And number 10, you have 6x cubed, 6a cubed, minus 12a to the 7th, minus 3a plus 9. So in terms of the coefficients and the constant, what's your GCF? 3. Do I need an a in my GCF? No, because I don't have an a in every term. So it's just 3. So you're going to say 3 times what is 6a cubed? 2a cubed. That's a cube. Why did you say squared?
Oh, I never mind. I forgot.
Okay.
They don't have the A in all.
There's no a in the GCF.
Yeah. Okay.
Minus 3 times what's 12a to the 7th?
4a to the 7th.
4a to the 7th. 3 times what's a negative 3a? a negative a, and then 3 times what's a positive 9?
3.
Positive 3. All right. Okay, so that was that section. Okay, so we were talking about factoring. Remember that? Well, the whole thing was factoring. But we're in particular talking about factoring trinomials. And we're looking at factoring trinomials, and the only thing we've done so far was where x squared had what coefficient?
1.
1. That's all we've done at this point. So, let's see, this was section 6.1. So, no, it was 6.2. 6.2. All right, so 6.2, let me see where we stopped. Where the, there we go. Okay, so it looks like we had stopped on number 6.2. 22. All right. All right, so let's look at number 9. That's page 392, number 9. And you want to factor x squared plus 3x minus 70. X squared plus 3x minus 70. First thing you should always do is what?
GCF.
GCF. What's the GCF here? Don't say there's none. There's always a GCF.
1.
It's 1. So since it's 1, I'm not going to pull out anything. But how many terms do you have? 3. So since I have 3 terms, I'm going to go directly and write what? 2 binomials. If this had 4 terms, what would you do?
You do the first 2, and then you do the
What's
second.
it called? Factor by grouping. Factor by grouping. All right. So since this is 3 terms, I'm going to go directly to the 2 binomials. And that's where you're going to use the idea of FOIL. So the x squared is the easy kind, where the coefficient is 1. That's the easy kind. What 2 things multiplied together is x squared?
X.
So that's my f right here. So first times first is x squared. So that's x times x, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this last class period. The last sign's negative. What does that mean about these signs in here? They're different. One's positive, one's negative. If this was positive, then the signs in here would be the same, and it would be the middle term. All right, so that takes care of F. Now we go to the L. Let's talk about 70. Give me 2 numbers whose product is 70.
2 times 35.
Okay, 2, 35,
10,
10, 7, 2, and, oh, we did 2.
I'm liking 10 and 7.
Yeah, okay. All right, and is that it? Okay, so that's it. No, there's 5 and what?
5 and 14. No.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, 5 and 14. Yeah. All right, and so you want to try numbers. It doesn't always work, but you want to try the 2 numbers that are closer together on the number line.
10 and 7.
So 10 and 7 are closer together on the number line than the others are. Doesn't always work out that way. On the right there. Doesn't always work out that way, but it tends to sometimes. So for right now, remember, we're going to do this trial and error. So it does not matter. It does not matter where we put the 10 or the 7. You're going to check your work. So let's say the 10 goes here, the 7 goes here. Okay? Now, again, one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. For right now, let's just do this trial and error, because you're going to be doing that trial and error in the next section where these coefficients are no longer a 1. So you have to do the trial and error. So here's the thought process you're going to go through. All right, I know that 10 times 7 is 70, okay? It may or may not work. If it doesn't work, I'll try some of these other pairs. I know the last sign's negative, so that means that one's negative, one's positive, right? Okay, so I filled out my binomials, correct? All right, now, my f is okay, because x times x is what?
X squared.
X squared. My L is okay, because a negative 10 times a positive 7 is a negative 7. What have I not checked in FOIL? The out and the inner. I have not checked the out and the inner. So that's where you got to do now.
7x.
What's the outer?
7x.
What's the inner?
Negative 10x.
When I add them up, what do I get?
Negative 3x.
Is that what you wanted?
Yeah,
No.
so
But it only differs by what?
The sign.
The sign. So since it only differs by the sign, just switch the signs. So in other words, instead of saying x minus 10, you're going to say x
plus 10
plus 10
and
times x
minus 7.
minus 7. And that should work, but check. Don't write down something and not check.
I have faith.
Because what's going to happen when you do that, I'm just going to write, why didn't you check? You would have seen it's not correct. Okay, all you really got to do is check the outer inner. What's the outer?
7x.
Negative 7x. What's the inner?
Positive 10.
Positive 10x. When I add them up, I now get a what?
3x.
Positive
3x, which is what you wanted. So on the blank, you would put x plus 10 times x minus 7. Now, someone could have put x minus 7 first, right? It does not matter. So you could say x minus 7 times x plus 10. Complementary.
I mean,
Commutative.
That's what I meant.
So multiplication is commutative. The order in which you multiply does not
One of them C
matter.
words.
All right, now let's look at number 18. You have 17 plus 18n plus n squared. Okay, so what might you want to do?
Rewrite it.
Reorder
Okay.
it.
So you could, now someone else could have left it like that. It makes no difference. I'll do it both ways, but it does not matter. But for most of you, and I would have done the same thing, I would have just put in descending order. We talked about the word descending last class period. So you put in descending order, go from largest exponent to smallest. What term are you going to list first?
N squared
Then
plus
18n
plus 17.
Plus 17. What's your GCF?
1.
So I'm directly to two binomials, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then FOIL.
So n on both sides.
Yeah, so since n squared is a coefficient of 1, that's the easy kind. So you're just going to say n times n.
Mm-hmm.
That's your first. Now the last is easy here because 17 is a prime number.
17 times 1.
So there's only one possibility for 17, and that's 17 and
1.
1. So I'm put the 17 here, the 1 here.
And it's a positive.
The last sign's positive. That means these signs in here are what?
The same.
The same, and it's going to be the
Positive.
middle sign. So they're both going to be what? Positive. All right, now once you fill in your two binomials, don't stop there because all you've done was the first and the last. That you know for sure is correct. But you got to do the out and the inner because you haven't done anything to make sure that you do get 18 in. What's the outer?
Yeah.
In. What's the inner?
17
And when I combine like terms, what do I get?
18 in.
Which is what you wanted. So there's your answer.
So if like we're on a test and we have one that is obvious like that because it is a prime and because it's both positives, you would still want us to write all that out. Testing
You mean
the
this?
prime.
What do you what now?
Okay, if we had a problem like this on the test
Okay.
and it was a prime number, so there could only be a 17 and a 1, and
Okay.
it was a positive, so you knew it had to be plus a plus, would you still want us to check the
You don't have to check
I?
anything if you don't want to.
Okay. And if
All right.
you always say check, show your work.
On the test, I'm not going to say check. Now, on a worksheet, there's one worksheet where it says, I want to see you checking. So, yes, you're going to have to do that. On a test, you can do what you want.
I just want to know if you counted that as showing your work. Or, I mean,
That is showing the work. So, if I said show the work, that's what you would do. Okay? All right. But I'm not going to ask you to do that on a test. Now, most of that, it's not going to be that simple, though. Most of it, though, you're going to have to do some stuff because you will not be able to look at it right away and say, oh, these two numbers work. Because you also have to make sure you get that middle term. So that's where the out and the inner comes into play. Okay. Now let's look at this. This is going to be number 12. You have x squared minus 7x plus 5. X squared minus 7x plus 5.
It's already in order.
It's in descending order.
2 by mom.
But when I do this, I need to go back and do the previous one, but leave it as it was, just to show you what you would do. All right, it's in descending order.
GCF,
GCF is
One.
1.
two binomials.
Yeah, it's a trinomial, so the two binomials, this was 4 terms, you do factor by grouping. X and X, right?
On both sides.
Okay, the last is easy.
Prime number.
That's a prime number, so 5 and 1. And that's the only possibility.
It's a positive, so you have to go with the sign on the middle.
Okay, so the last sign's positive, so these signs have to be the same, and they're both going to be negative. All right, so am I done?
No.
No, you gotta
Unless
check.
wants to check.
So you think you're done, though?
Well, the way you're asking that, I'm thinking maybe not.
You see what he did? He asked that question earlier, and now he wrote this down, and he thinks he's fine, so he's going to go to the next problem. You got to check. You don't have to check though, but you maybe a good idea to check. What's the outer?
X.
Negative x.
Okay, negative X.
Now you see you're gonna put x on there, and it's not an x. It's a what? Negative x. What's the inner?
Negative 5X.
When I combine like terms, what do I get?
-6.
Is that what you wanted?
No.
No. All right.
Oh,
Is switching going to help?
no.
Switching's not going to help, and that's the only possibility, right? So you've exhausted all possibilities. So, and remember, we haven't really talked about this, but not all trinomials can be factored.
So would it be no solution?
No. Okay, so I'm glad she used those words. So don't say no solution, because this is not an equation. You're not solving the equation. This is not an equation because you don't see a what?
Equal sign.
Equal sign. That's an expression. And the direction said to factor, right? Well, basically, you cannot factor.
So what would you put in the list?
You put the word prime.
No.
Okay? So then you cross this out, and in a blank, you'd say prime.
So I asked that question and you said, I'll show you.
No, I didn't say that.
I know, but
Oh.
you tried to trick me up.
No, you did that to yourself. Okay, so in the blank, though, don't say cannot be factored. They want you to use what word? Prime. Prime means cannot be factored.
I take it there's gonna be one of these on the test.
Possibly, but there's one on the worksheet. Remember the worksheet? One of the directions says one of those is prime that you got.
Oh, yeah, I remember you saying that.
All right. And I said we haven't done one. We're going to do one next class period.
Yeah.
Okay. So on that worksheet you picked up, last class period, one of those in the direction said one of those is prime. And what do you put in that blank?
Prime.
Prime. Or the word prime. Okay. Now let's look at this, and this is number 21. Okay, you have a squared minus 10ab plus 16b squared. Now we did something like this before, last class period. We did 22. 22 was similar to this. This is 21, so let's see if you remember what to do here. What's the GCF? GCF is 1.
Just one.
Okay, you don't have variables, the same variables in all terms.
Right, so you can't do that.
And the coefficients are 1, negative 10, and 16. The GCF of that is 1. And so it's a trinomial, so you're going directly to two binomials.
A on each side.
Okay, A. So the first is easy.
16b squared.
Okay, now the last, 16.
Four,
There's
4B.
8, 2, 4, 4, 16, 1, right?
I'm just gonna be
So what do you want to try?
4 and 4.
Try 4. You want to try A and 2? Okay. No. But remember, let's do what we said. We always
Stay the closest.
the closest to the number line. All right.
So that we-
And let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. So, but be careful. I can't just say 4 and 4. I got to say what? 4B.
B.
Okay, good. Don't forget the variables. There are two different variables here. Now the last sign's positive.
Mm-hmm.
That means the signs in here are
So it's gonna be a negative.
the same, so they're both going to be
Negative.
negative, because that's the only way you can get a negative middle term is if you have a negative and a negative, because a negative and a negative is a negative. Now don't say I thought it was positive. A negative times a negative is a positive, but a negative plus a negative is a negative. So they both have to be negative. Now let's check down the inner. What's the outer?
Yeah.
What's the outer?
No, 4 AB.
Negative
Negative
4AB. Okay. What's the inner? Negative
Negative
4AB. When I add them up, what do I get?
Negative 8.
but that's not what you wanted.
No.
So 4 and 4 is not going to help. Now someone else said, what'd you say? 8 and 2. So let's try 8 and 2. So this is trial and error. That's what you're going to be using for the most part, trial and error.
So we're still
All right,
both sides.
A,
Still negative on each side.
all right, 8 and 2. For right now, let's put A here and 2 here, but don't forget I got to put the A and the 2 with a
B,
B.
and it's still negative on both sides.
All right, and then negative.
That's it.
All right, so a negative 8B times a negative 2B is a positive 16B squared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the F and the L are okay. We just got to do the outer and the inner. What's the outer?
Negative 2AB.
What's the inner?
Negative 8AB.
When I add them up, what do I get?
Negative 10AB.
And that's your answer. So A minus 8B times A minus 2B. Or you could put what first?
No other.
A minus 2B multiplied by A minus
Okay.
8B, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. Okay, now I want to go back to this one. And let's just, number 18 star. Let's keep in that order it originally was in. And let's go directly to the two binomials.
Okay.
FYL. Okay, what two things multiplied together is a 17?
17 and 1.
17 and 1. All right. So that takes care of the F. Now the L, what two
Yes,
things
we
multiplied together is a
n.
positive n squared? N times n. The last sign's positive, right?
So they're plus and plus.
These signs have to be the same, and the root would be the middle. So plus plus. But once you fill into the two binomials, don't stop there. You got to check down the inner. What's the outer?
17N.
What's the inner?
1N.
When you add them up, what do you get?
18N.
And that's what you wanted. So your answer could have been this, or you could have said 17 plus n times 1 plus n. Now make sure you understand that that's the same thing, because look, 17 plus n is the same as n plus 17, right? Because addition is commutative as well. 1 plus n is the same as what? N plus 1. All right, so just note that this is the same thing. Okay? All right, now let's look at number 24. 24. Okay, now that's going to be the next worksheet, and I don't think I gave that to you yet. So this is 24. You have 3x squared plus 30x plus 63.
Okay. Keep myself in gear.
What are you going to do first?
GCF.
GCF. What's a GCF?
3.
3. GCF is 3.
We knew this was coming.
All right, so the GCF is 3, so you can pull the 3 out first. When I pull the 3 out, what's the trinomial that's in here?
X squared plus 10x plus 31. Or, no, yeah, 21. Sorry.
21.
Sorry.
All right? So I took out the GCF. Now, am I done?
Probably not.
No, because you see that trinomial, you got to see if you can factor that. So factoring, you got to factor completely. So you factored partially. I mean, you did factor, because factor means you write as a product, correct? But when we speak mathematically, we tend, when you say the word factor, we say in our minds factor completely. It has to be factored completely.
So you got to do the part inside the parentheses.
So you got to see if you can factor this trinomial. So this trinomial, x squared plus 10x plus 21. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So I would write this off to the side, and then I would go and I would do the two binomials.
GCF is 1.
Right. Well, you already dealt with the GCF. So
Well, I
the
mean, for
GCF
that-
will.
For that part of it, I mean.
All right. So what do you want to try?
7 and
7, 3, x and x, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So xx, 7, 3. Last sign's positive.
So it's going to be a plus.
Both.
because of the other
You understand all of you? It's going to be both positives in here, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
If this was a negative 10x, you would say both what?
Negative.
Negative. All right. Now, once you fill this out, don't automatically assume it's your answer.
You got to put.
You got to check the out and the inner.
Oh, you got to
What's the outer?
3x.
3x.
What's the inner?
7x.
When I add them up, what do I get?
10x.
That's what you wanted. So therefore, the answer in the blank, you gonna don't forget you gotta have your GCF. So it's 3 times
X plus 7, x plus 3.
plus 3. And we always tend to put the monomial first. All right, now I asked you this last class period. How many factors are in the answer? And almost all of you didn't know the answer to that. Hopefully
3.
you know it now.
3.
3. There are 3 factors. My factors are 3. What's the other factor?
X plus 7.
X plus 7. What's the other factor?
Plus
X
3.
plus 3. And the x plus 7, the x plus 3 are binomials. The 3 is a monomial. Always put the monomial in front. Put the monomial in front. All right, so there's your answer there. So let's look at number 26. Okay, so in 26 you have 3x cubed minus 12x squared minus 36x.
3.
3x.
3x.
Ah.
GCF is at 3x. So you pull out 3x, and then what's going to be the trinomial?
X squared minus 4x minus
12.
That's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that your answer?
No.
No.
You got to factor the inside the parentheses.
Yeah. Now, it could be that you can't factor what's inside the parentheses. You can't factor that trinomial, but you got to have to try. Okay, so let's do the 2 binomials now.
x.
X.
X and x. All right, what about 12?
So negative, so it's you don't have.
Let's not worry about the negative yet. Let's talk about the 12. What are the possibilities for 12?
3 and 4.
3 and 4, 6 and 2, 12 and 1. What do you want to try?
3 and 4.
Okay, 3 and 4. And let's do 3 and
They're
4.
close. They're closest.
Yeah,
together.
because that's what we said. Usually it'll be the closest one. It's not going to be at this time. It won't be at this time. It'll be the 6 and the 2. But let's do the 3 and the 4 because that's what I told you to try first, right?
Which is the only reason I said it.
That's okay. 3 and 4. But the last sign is what?
Negative.
Negative. Last sign is negative. Now that means that one's positive, the other one is
Negative.
negative. Now be strategic. Here's the way I would do it. If the signs are different, here's the way I would do it. You're going to see it in the next section as well. I would just go ahead right away and do the outer and the inner without even doing the signs. What's the outer?
4x.
What's the inner?
3x.
Okay, now my middle term has to be what kind of number?
Negative.
Negative. So that means the larger of these has to be negative. So which one has to be the negative?
7.
Negative 4, which means this is negative, and this has to be the what? Positive, which means this is positive. But when I add them up, it doesn't help me, because what do I get?
Negative 1.
Negative x, and I wanted negative 4x. Is switching going to help?
No.
No. So the 4 and the 3 did not work. Now what do you want to
Now
try?
you can do your 6 and 2.
6 and 2. Let's put the 6 here, 2 there. See what happens. Okay, now again, I know the last sign's negative, right? And the only way that can happen is if one's positive and the other one is
No.
negative. Let's look at the outer. What's the outer?
You know your smaller number is going to be a plus.
What's the inner?
6, 6.
Okay, the larger of these, the coefficients, the larger the coefficients, will take that middle sign. So that means 6x has to be what?
Negative.
Negative. And the 2x has to be
Positive.
positive. And when I add them up, I do get a what?
Negative 4.
Negative 4x. Now let's fill the signs. The outer has to be positive. So that means the 2 has to be what?
Put the plus over there
Plus.
and put the negative on
The
it.
inner has to be negative, which means the 6 has to be negative. And there's your answer. Except you got to put it with the
You
what?
got to put it with the 3x.
3x.
Square. Yeah, 3x. I mean.
So 3x multiplied by x minus 6
Okay.
times x plus 2.
Trial and error. That's all you're doing is trial and error. Checking FOIL. Doing FOIL with it. Yes.
Okay, so I know you're saying choose the numbers closest on the number line, but if we have an idea like,
Oh, no, you didn't have to.
okay,
You didn't have to go directly to that. If you can see right away
right,
that, no, that's not going to work, I'm going to try something else and do something else.
Okay.
I'm not looking to see if you're doing I'm really not looking for this.
I was just being a blind follower whenever I said
Okay.
3 and 4 the first time.
So as you practice with this, you'll It's not always going to be true, but you'll tend to know which numbers to use for the most part.
Okay.
All right, number, let's do 48. 48. All right, 48, you have 3x cubed plus 3x squared minus 126x. That's minus 126x.
Gonna say 3. X.
3x. All right, 3x. Because 3 goes to 126, right?
Mm-hmm. 42 times.
So that'll be 3x times what?
X squared plus X minus. Yeah, minus 42.
42?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, now don't say that's the answer because it's not, although you factored, you didn't factor completely. So whenever the direction says factor, it really means factor completely. So you got to take that trinomial and go further with it. So the two binomials. All right, so x times x is the easy part. Okay, what do you want to try for 42?
6 and 7.
6 and 7. All right, so let's put the 7 here, 6 here. Now in the next section, you see how I put the 7 first, the 6?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next section though, it doesn't matter here because the coefficient of x squared is 1. But the next section is not going to be that way anymore. You may have to switch these, the 7 and the 6.
Right
All right.
now, you can see that you need a positive 1x. So you,
Okay, so the outer is 6x, right? The inner is 7x, and here's the way I want you to think about this. The last sign's negative, so that means these signs in here are different. So the larger of these coefficients will take that middle sign. So that means 7x has to be positive, and the 6x has to be negative, and you combine them, you do get a what?
positive 1x.
Positive x, which is what you wanted. So now you know your signs. The outer, there's going to be what?
Negative,
Negative. The inner,
positive.
positive. So that's what you get.
Put that with your.
You put that with a 3x. And there's your answer. So that's factor completely. So you wrote this trinomial as a product of factors. All right, let's do 56. 56. All right, 56, you have 50 plus 20t plus 2t squared. All right, so if you want to put it in descending order, you can. Some students prefer to do it that way. So if you put it in descending order, what do you get?
2t squared plus 20t plus 50.
Okay, what's your GCF?
2.
Not 2t,
No,
but just
there's
2,
no
right?
T on the 50.
So 2 times t squared 10t
10t
plus 25.
25, yeah.
And you could probably guess when you rewrite that trinomial, you could probably guess as to what your two factors are. What do you think?
T.
Okay, t and t. What else?
5 or 5.
5 and 5.
Which will give you the 10t.
And what are the signs? The signs are easy because the last sign's positive, so you know they have to be what?
The same. Which
The
is gonna
same.
Be the plus.
See here, when I did this one, and the last sign was negative, that's where I said, well, let's just think about this. So one has to be positive, one has to be negative. But here you don't have to think that way because the last sign's positive. It means that these have to be the same, and it's going to be the
Same as
middle sign.
sign.
All right, now check it though. What's the outer?
5t.
What's the inner?
5t.
When I add them up, what do I get?
10t.
So what's the answer?
2 times t plus 5 times t plus 5.
Or you could have said 2 times
T plus 5 squared.
t plus 5 squared.
Which would you prefer?
It does not matter. You need to know both. Okay? 44. X squared plus 4x minus 10.
That's an excellent one.
What's the GCF?
No, it's going to be,
What's the GCF?
2. Oh, 1.
GCF is 1. So go directly to binomials. What do you want to try? XX, definitely, right?
And then,
What else do you want to put in there?
2 and 5.
2 and 5, okay. So the last sign is negative. That means that one of these is positive, one is what? Negative? What's the outer?
5x.
What's the inner?
2x.
Okay, now, I want even before we go any further, you know that if one's positive, one's negative, you have to subtract, though, correct?
Right.
I don't want you to waste your time determining which one's positive, which one's negative, because when I subtract 2x from 5x, what do I get?
-3.
I get 3x, in particular, though, right? The difference is 3x.
So it's not going.
Is that what I want?
No.
So that's not even going to work. So determining which one's positive, which one's negative is not going to matter at all.
What else can you do to get
10 and 1, is that going to help?
10? No.
No. What's the answer?
Prime.
Prime. Answer is prime. Now, at some point, some of you could probably look at this and right away in your mind say, well, nothing's going to work there. So you just say prime. You don't have to do all this. Just make sure you go through the process, though, in your mind. So the answer is prime. Nothing's going to work. All right, number 50. You have 3x squared y minus 9xy plus 45y.
Just 3y.
3y is the GCF?
I'm thinking that. Or am I wrong?
Well, 3 goes into 3, 3 goes into 9. Does 3 go into 45?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and is there a y in every term?
Yes.
Yes.
So is the GCF
3y.
3y? Okay, now what's that trinomial going to be, though? 3y times what's 3x squared y?
X squared.
Y'all agree it's x squared, though, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Minus 3 x, because 3y times a negative 3x is a negative 9xy.
Plus 15.
Plus 15.
15? Okay.
Period.
Is that your answer?
No, you just gotta factor.
You gotta-
part
You got to rewrite that trinomial and see if you can do anything with that.
Your GCF is on that as part, it'll be 1.
All right, so XX, what are the possibilities of 15?
3 and 5.
3, 5, 15, and 1. What do you want to try?
But it's gotta come out with a -3, so.
What do you, 3 and 5? Okay, so
Yeah, that ain't gonna work.
yeah, make sure I wrote down the problem correctly. 50. All right, so I did. All right, so 3 and 5, right?
Mhm.
Okay, and then you know the last sign's positive, so these signs have to be what?
Negative.
The same, negative, but you got to check. What's the outer?
-3.
3x. negative
What's the
3x,
inner?
Negative 5x.
When you add them up, what do we? Oh, that's 5.
You ain't gonna
You get
a
negative
3x.
8x, though, right?
Yeah.
Not 2x, negative 8x. But is that what you wanted? No. All right. Now you do understand that both of those had to be negative.
Right.
All right. And a negative 5 and a negative 3 is a negative
Negative
8. And you want a negative 3. There's no way you can get a negative 3.
No, so it's
So
start, we're looking at
again,
prime.
the question is, what's the answer?
Prime.
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 No.
What else can you get to -3?
That is the answer.
Oh.
You can't factor any further.
The only thing you could take out was the.
Yeah, I mean, factoring involves GCF, right? That's part of factoring. So I took out the GCF, and then I tried to determine if I could factor this trinomial, and I can't. So don't say prime, because when you say prime, that means the original could not be factored.
No.
Can the original be factored?
Yes.
Yes, the GCF. So when you say prime, you're saying the original problem could not be factored, but that's not true because you did. You factor out a 3y.
Yeah, we were trained to do it the other way, though, so.
All right. So there are situations where this trinomial you can't do anything else with. And there's an example, number 50. Okay? All right, so that's the answer. Don't say prime. Now this, in your mind, you would say cannot be factored, so that trinomial is prime. But the original problem was factorable. How did I factor the original problem?
You got
I took out a 3y. I factored out the GCF.
so if we can at least get the GCF, but we end up stopping, just circle it from there. But if we can't factor it any further than that,
Go back.
Yeah, then,
Yeah,
then,
just go
then
back
that's
in.
your answer.
okay.
Yeah, so in the blank, you would put 3y times x squared
Yeah.
minus 3x plus 15. That's what you would put in the blank. All right, then let's look at number 35. No, not 35, 36. 36. So 36, you have x squared minus xy minus 6y squared. What's the GCF?
1.
Okay, and then it's a trinomial, so you can do the two binomials, right?
Mhm.
Okay, first is easy. What goes here? All right, now let's talk about 6. There are two possibilities, 3 and 2, 6 and 1. What do you want to try? 3 and 2?
No,
Right.
6 and 1 is going to be a right answer, though.
Mm-mm.
No?
3 and 2.
You got the 1x, negative
Mhm.
1xy.
Okay, so 3y and 2y,
Oh,
correct?
Okay, that was next.
Okay. The last sign's negative, so that means these signs in here are different. So let's talk about, since they're different, let's talk about the out and the inner. What's the outer?
2xy,
What's the inner?
3xy.
The larger the coefficients, we'll take the middle sign. So 3xy has to be negative, and 2xy has to be positive. And when I add them up, what's a negative 3 and a positive 2?
-1.
Which is what you wanted. So my outer and inner are correct. I just got to make sure I put the right sign. So the outer is positive, so that means this has to be plus, and this has to be negative. And so there's your answer. So x minus 3y times x plus 2y. Okay? All right, and then let's look at number 60. You have 3x to the 6 plus 30x to the 5th plus 72x to the 4th.
3x.
3x is a GCF?
Mhm.
Very good. 3x to the 4th.
Yeah, because the fourth is the
All right.
exponent's the
3x to the 4th is a GCF. Okay, what's going to be the trinomial? Okay. Uh-huh. 24, right? You all agree?
Mhm.
3 times 24 is 72. Use your calculator if you don't know. Just say 72 divided by 3, you get 24. Okay, now let's deal with the trinomial. So XX, and what do we want to try for 24? 12 and 2? Okay, let's do 12 and 2. Yeah, someone said 12 and 2. Let's do 12 and 2 first.
Oh, yeah, if you do a negative.
Okay, so 12 times 2, 24. I agree with that. Now the last sign's positive, so that means that the signs are the same, and they're both going to be positive. But check the outer and the inner. The outer is
It's not going to work.
2x. The inner is 12x. When I add them up, I get
14.
14x. That's not what you wanted. 6 and 4, right?
Mhm.
XX, 6, 4,
That'll work.
plus, plus. Y'all agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now the outer this time is 4x.
4x
inner
plus
is
6x.
And when you add them up, you do get that 10x, which is what you want. But what's the answer in the blank?
So 3x fourth
3
times x plus 6 times x plus 4.
Right, and remember, always put the monomial first. Could someone had put x plus 4 second?
Yes.
Times, so you could have said x plus 4 times x plus 6, but always put the monomial first, out in front. Okay, let's look at 66. Okay, 66, you have negative x squared plus 8x minus 7. Now the direction says this. It will say this. It will say factor out the negative, factor out negative 1 first. That's what it says.
All right, well,
So when you factor, when you factor, and the x squared term is negative, coefficient's negative,
Mhm.
it's always easy to factor if the coefficient is positive. So if it's negative, take out the negative 1. Factor out the negative 1 first.
Mhm.
Okay? Most of the problems that you're going to have, the x squared is going to be a positive coefficient. But just in case it was negative, take out the negative 1 first. So you can say negative 1 times what? And which way?
X.
X squared. Because a negative 1 times x squared is a what?
Negative.
Negative x squared. What's the next one, though?
Times,
Y'all, it's taking a long time to tell me the second term.
Negative 8x.
Negative 8x. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. Plus 7. Good Lord, it took y'all forever to do that.
At least we got that.
I need to bring a multiplication table in here.
feel free.
1 times 8 is 8. 1 times 9 is 9. Okay, but what you're doing is you're saying a negative times a positive is a what? Negative. A negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative times a positive is a negative. All right. Okay, am I done?
No.
No, you gotta check that trinomial.
So.
What do you think? That one's easy because it's prime.
It's gonna be a 1.
X,
Yeah.
7 and 1.
Yeah, a 1.
Y'all agree?
Plus, so
Because there's no possibility for 7.
it's a positive, so it's going to be 2 negatives
Mm-hmm.
in this case.
And still check it though. What's the outer? Negative X.
Negative 1x,
What's the inner?
negative 7x,
When I add them up, what do I get?
negative 8x,
Which is what you wanted. So what's the answer?
negative
Negative
1.
one.
So you want us to
And
put
the
the
X-
1?
Yes. Well, okay. So negative 1. Hold on. Negative 1 times what?
x minus 7 times x minus 1.
Now, when you, how else would you write this? What would you write?
You could write it as
X minus 7.
Just
No,
negative.
No. Be careful. The answer.
Put the negative on the outside.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so now you could do that,
That's
but
what
the
I'm
negative
saying.
has to be there though. Okay.
Right.
So either one's fine.
That one's fine.
Okay. All right. Then 68 says this. All right. 68. You have 1/3 y squared minus 5/3 y
That's getting crucial.
yeah.
minus 8. Minus 8.
That's 8.
All right. So the GCF will at least be a 1/3 y.
Let me make sure I read this. 1/3 y squared minus
So no,
5/3.
there's no y.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Minus
There's no
8.
y.
Okay. Now, here's what they tell you to do. The direction says factor out the 1/3 first. That's what it says. So it will say factor out the 1/3. Now, on your worksheet, or on your test, I'm not going to have one like this,
Thank you.
but just in case you see it on my math lab, and on my math lab it says factor out 1/3 first. That's what you're going to do. So my math lab, I haven't looked to see if they have it in my math lab, but it's in here, so it could be in my math lab. So you say 1/3 times what? 1/3 times what's
Y
1/3 y squared? That one's easy. This is y squared. Y'all agree?
Mhm.
1/3 times what's a negative 5/3?
Negative 4.
No.
Negative 5. Negative 5. Where are you getting negative 4
5.
from? Negative 5 what? Y. Okay, now be careful for the next one, the last one. 1/3 times what is a negative 8?
Oh, geez.
Now that's so that's one you got to think about.
24. Negative 24 thirds.
No,
Am I right?
24.
Yeah, negative 24.
24.
Negative 24. Okay.
Because look, 1/3 times 24 is what?
24 thirds.
Which is
8.
8, and that's what you wanted. So it has to be that.
That's why I set the 24 thirds.
Okay? Now again, I'm not going to have them like this on a test or a worksheet, but it could be in my math lab. So think about how to get this term. 1/3 times what is 8. So basically, you just take the denominator and multiply by this thing. What's 8 times 3?
24.
And that's what you put here. Okay? Now factor y squared minus 5y minus 24. What do you want to try?
All right, well, there's y.
Y times y is the easy one. Now what about 24?
Well, there's
8 and 3, 6 and 4, 12 and 2, 24 and 1. What do you want to try?
8 and 3.
8 and 3. 8 and 3. That's the one that's going to work. Because last sign's negative, right? It means these signs in here are what? Different. So let's just do the signs last. What's the outer?
3y,
What's the inner?
8y,
The large of these will take the middle signs. That means 8y has to be,
negative,
3y has to be.
positive,
When I add them up, I do get a.
negative 5y,
Very good. So I know my sign. The outer has to be
positive,
positive. The inner has to be.
negative.
All right. And so what's the answer? Nope.
No, I'm sorry, I'm the one.
1/3 times.
Y minus 8.
Multiplied by y plus 3.
Yeah. So just in case you have one like that in my math lab, that's what you do. Okay? All right, and that's all this section was about. We're done with that section.
Cool.
All right. Now, still trial and error. All right. So don't make. We'll do a few problems. Don't make this too difficult. It is not difficult. So I want you to think about this. So I'm going to write this down. And we're doing trial and error. Trial and error. So this is section 6.3. Trial and error now. Same thing we've been doing. And this will be number 8. 3x squared plus 8x plus 4. Okay? All the ideas we did earlier still apply here. What do you look for first?
GCF.
What's the GCF?
1.
1. Okay? So does this polynomial have 4 terms or 3 terms?
3.
3.
So you go directly to the 2
Binomial.
binomials. All right. Okay, and then FOIL. Now, the only difference now is that x squared no longer has a coefficient of 1. Has a coefficient of 3. Okay? All right. But we're still doing trial and error. Nothing's changed. All right, so what times what is 3x squared? 3x and x. It does not matter where you put the 3x or the x. Because you're going to check. If it doesn't work, you may have to switch it. Okay? So that's where the switching is going to come into play here. So 3x, x. Everybody agree that 3x times x is 3x squared? So that takes care of the f. Now let's go to the last. What times what is 4?
2
Okay,
and 2.
4 and 1, 2 and 2. You want to try 2 and 2 first?
Yes.
Okay. We'll try 2 and 2 first. All right, now let's talk about the last sign. The last sign is
Positive.
positive. That means these signs in here have to be the
Same.
same, and they're both
Positive.
positive. Okay. Now, I've checked the F and I checked the L. What have I not checked?
The outer and inner.
All right, what is the outer?
3x times 2 is 6x.
6x.
6x. What's the inner?
2x.
When I add them up, what do I get?
8x.
Is that what you wanted?
Yes.
So I found the answer. What's the answer?
3x plus 2 times x plus 3.
That's it.
What she said.
Okay. That's it. All right. Trial and error. Nothing's changed. The same thing you've been doing.
This is what he did for the x, wasn't it?
All right.
Coefficient.
Number, let's do, all right, let's do 14. 3x squared plus 20x minus 63. 3x squared plus 20x minus 63. What's your GCF?
1.
Okay, it's a trinomial, so I'm going to go directly to the
Binomial.
2 binomials. F-O-I-L. Let's do the F first. What times what is 3x squared? There's only one possibility.
3x times
3x and x. Okay? All right, now let's do the last. Right here. So what times what is 63?
7 and 9.
7 and 9 is a
3
possibility.
and 21.
3 and 21 is a possibility. 63 and 1, that's about it, right?
Yes, sir.
That's it. Okay. So what do you want to try first? 9 and 7? All right. So I am going to put I'm going to do this wrong for right now. I'm going to put you said 9 and 7, right? Okay. So I'm going to put the 7 here and the 9 here. Okay? Now, as we go through this process, I want you to hear what I'm about to say. All right. Now, you said 9, 7 because those are the two numbers close together. All right. The last sign's negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means the outer and the inner have to have different signs.
Mm-hmm.
So before you put in the signs, let's talk about the outer and the inner. What's the outer? No, yeah. What's the inner?
7x.
All right. Now, you know that they're going to be different. So just right now, what I would do is subtract them. What's 27 minus 7?
20.
Is that what I wanted? Yes. That's what I wanted. So we're almost done. So I got my 20x that I need. And it has to be positive, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the only way I can get a positive, though, is if the 27 is positive, the middle sign, and the 7 is negative. So that means that the outer is
Positive.
positive and the inner is negative. So there's your answer. Now,
Can I ask a little bit of question? Unfortunately, I had to go to the bathroom,
well, that's your issue.
and I'm kind of confused as to what you said.
Maybe the next one you'll get through it. Just hold on for right now.
I know I didn't.
Now, what if you did this? And that's where you're going to start having to think this. What if you put the 9 here and the 7 here? Okay? Now, I want you to think about this.
That's what I was gonna do.
Okay? So, but I want you to think about it. Be strategic. If you put the 9 here, and I'm going to cover this up, and I want you to listen carefully. What do those two terms have in common?
That they're divisible
A
by
3. So that means that you could take out a 3, right? Which means this, which means that the original problem you could have taken out a 3. And could I?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, 3 does not go to
20.
20.
Sorry.
No. So be strategic. So you know that you cannot put a 9 there. Because if you did, then I could take out a 3, and the original I could not have taken out a 3. Okay? So just be strategic. That cannot happen. So you know you're not going to put a 9 there. So that's why when I was doing this, I did not put a 9 there at first because I didn't want to talk about that at that point. All right? So we're going to get to some problems in which we're going to talk about that again, but I want you to put that in your mind. Put it in your mind. Does it make sense to put a 9 there? The answer is no. And that can help you. That will help you in terms of trial and error to know that fact. I cannot put a 9 here because I can take out a 3, which meant that the original, all 3 were divisible by 3, and they're not. These two are, but this one is not. Okay? All right. Let's do one more, and then we'll do some more with this next class period. And it's just trial and error. It's not that difficult. It's just practice that you got to do. So let's look at this. Let me do one where the first term's easy. Let's see. That's not helping at all. All right, let's do this. Crud. Okay, so 7. I'll just write this example right now. 7b squared. 7b squared. 21. All right, 16b plus 16b minus 15.
It's just a bundle of joy in it.
I know, let me just make sure I didn't mess this up. 7b squared. Okay, negative, make that negative 16b. Negative 16b, and then minus 15. Okay. All right, so let's deal with that.
Alright, so you have 7B.
What's the GCF? 1.
One.
Okay, GCF is 1. So 7b
and
and
then
b. Okay, so FOIL, F-Y-L. So the F is okay. Let's do the last. So what two things multiplied together is 15?
3 and 5.
5 and 3? 15 and 1. What do you want to try first?
15 and 1.
I'm going to do the 5 and 3 first. I'm going to do 5 and 3 first. Okay. So I'm going to put the 5 here, the 3 there. Okay? If it doesn't work, we'll switch them. Now that idea we had earlier, remember this? Is it okay for right now to put the 5 there? Yeah, because what's the GCF? 1. All right? And the same thing here, the GFS is 1. And we knew the original, the GCF was what? 1. If I put the 3 here, would it matter? No.
No.
Okay? But let's put the 5 here, the 3 there, and see if it works. Okay, now the last sign is what?
Negative.
Negative. So that means that the outer and the inner will have different signs. What's the outer?
21B.
What's the inner?
5B.
Okay. Now, when I subtract those, and I'm going to subtract because they're different, right? The signs are different. When I subtract, do I get that 16?
Yes.
Yes.
But it's not negative.
Well, but we can make it negative. So that means that the 21b has to be what? Negative, and the 5b has to be
Positive.
positive. And now I'm going to get a what? Negative 16b. So that means that the outer, the 3 has to be what? Negative, and the 5 has to be positive. Now check it though. What's the outer? Negative 21b. What's the inner? When I add them up, what do I get?
Negative 16B.
Now, it turned out to where the 5 worked out right away. But what if someone had done, now that's the answer, right? Okay, that's the answer. But I just want to show you that you're not going to get that answer right away. Someone else could have said this. I just want you to be aware of that. Someone else could have said 7b and b. Now, you had to say that because there's only one possibility for 7b squared, and that's what? 7b and b. You had no choice. But you had a couple of choices for 15, 5 and 3, 15 and 1. I would stick with the 5 and 3. But what if I put the 3 here and the 5 there? Right? That's a 5. All right, and the last sign is negative, correct? So that means these signs in here have to be different. So let's do the outer and the inner. What's the outer this time?
35B.
What's the inner?
3B.
And I know that they're going to have different signs, which means I'm going to need to subtract them. When I say 35 minus 3, what do I get?
32B.
But that's not what I want.
No.
So right away, I know that I can't use that. So then that's where you would switch the 5 and the 3. And that's the one that worked. Okay? So there are times you got to switch things. That's trial and error.
With that kind of problem, there could be quite a bit of trial and error because you're trying to get your numbers first. And then once you do get the right numbers, then you still got to figure out which order the
That's correct.
signs go.
But sometimes some problems are easier than others, especially when it's prime. Like the first one's prime, so you knew that's only one possibility. Next class period, we're going to do one where this is not prime. See, both of those are prime, right? 3 is prime number. 3 is a prime number. 7 is what kind of number? Prime. So we're gonna do one where the first is not prime and the last is not prime. So that's where it's gonna get a little more involved. But you're still gonna do what? Use trial and error. Trial and error.
All day.
Well, after about 10 minutes, if you can't figure it out, then probably it's prime.
Or you forget that you got the GCF and you factored it down as far as you could. You were looking for something that don't exist.
That's a possibility as well.
Yeah, we're.
All right, so we're gonna do more with this section next class period. Now, don't make it a difficult section. It's not that bad. Okay, so let me see.